World content has been in a rough spot lately, with Battle for Azeroth feeling essentially no different than to Legion, but with the added loss of World Quest Group Finder. Well, with patch 8.2, Blizzard finally aimed to shake up their world content, designing something that could feel fresh. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Rise of Azshara video. So, today we are going to be going into detail on the world content of this patch. What it is, how it works, whether it's different or not to what we currently have, and whether it can freshen up the gameplay experience of World of Warcraft. While I think the dungeons and raids have been fantastic, well, the world really has suffered over the years, making these additions all the more important, especially with how underwhelming Battle for Azeroth's carbon copy of the Legion systems were. Let's kick things straight off with Nazjatar. This is the largest of the patch's two new zones, and it's very different to Mechagon in its overall style of play. Now, without going into spoilers, neither the Alliance or the Horde start off the patch in a favourable situation. Narratively, Azshara sort of drops us on top of her army, so we are focused on running away to the caverns. When we do that, we find two friendly factions. Well, the Horde have one faction who are a group of ex-Naga slaves, including Gelbin and Giants, while the Alliance group up with a bunch of rebel warrior people who are kind of like Naga with legs. Now, this is when the zone begins to open up. First, your allied faction has a base, and as you do content in the area, their bases will expand as you help them grow in power. Part of this will involve a new set of daily objectives to complete in Nazjatar, with those seemingly being designed to add more context to the world quest that you're doing, giving you that feeling of knocking out two birds with one stone. It seems like this will be similar to how we unlocked new things on Argus, such as the teleporters, and sort of progress through the zone, but we will have to wait and see just how the development of our allied bases is reflected mechanically. Past this, world quests still do exist. However, Blizzard are attempting to implement them in a new-ish way. So, Nazjatar will have an emissary, as you would expect, but the world quests themselves are a little bit more different. Jeremy was very adamant about how they were themed around the story of the zone. It seems like they very much do have that military focus with their theme. He said that if you see a rare elite or elite world quest, it will actually spawn in, and that rare elite will have an affix, meaning that it will feel different to fight every time that you fight it. I mean, that's almost like a Diablo boss where they, spawn in with a few different affixes, so I think that's a pretty good system. Now, those elites will also spawn in with reinforcements, and they will fortify their local area. That seems quite good, especially if those rare elites have interactions with the other world quests, and indeed it would be ideal if a bunch of world quests would spawn in around them in an area, such that you basically have a fortified area with a big boss to kill and a bunch of sub-objectives inside it. That would start to make the world quests feel a lot better to play, instead of being the evenly spaced out instances of 2 minutes of combat, 3 minutes of travel, rinse and repeat that we currently have. He also talked about how new world quests will be unlocked based on the denizens of Zinashari. These will be unlocked as you quest through the zone, and he seemed to indicate that was a sort of newish thing. I'm assuming he means new for BFA because, of course, that is very similar to how Argus worked, and we do know that one of their goals has been to rework other successful ideas into this patch. Now, of course, this all ties into the daily objectives that I mentioned earlier, so those daily objectives are heavily themed around the requirements of building up your base and keeping your army going, and they're all located quite near your base. Jeremy talked about how they wanted it to feel like a high-efficiency activity, so in my mind, it really is just giving you that quest stacking feeling. It seems to be what they want to do, along with the rewards for those meta objectives probably being tied to the progression of your base. Now, will the base be an instanced unlock or a global unlock? That's a pretty hard choice. One can better utilize the game being an MMO, but the other would involve more tangible individual progress. I think we all at this stage feel that contributing to a regional progress bar just doesn't feel that great. So that's the world quests, the objectives, and a touch on the base progression. Another important progression system is your combat allies. So these are NPCs who, like the bodyguards of the past, will help you out in combat. They, thankfully though, are the best version of this yet, at least in terms of the planned scope. Now, Warlords of Draenor had its problems, but one nice part of its bodyguards is that they had their own quest line and they had a little bit of progression. Well, 8.2 is doing that again, but this time with its 3 combat allies. Probably 3 per faction, but with them being mechanically mirrored. Now, like the bodyguards of the past, they will follow you into combat, but unlike the bodyguards, they actually have 30 levels to progress through. As they advance through these levels, they will gain new abilities and they will be able to aid you more and more in battle. They will gain experience from completing content while you have them with you, so that's things like killing rares, completing world quests, just all that regular stuff. Their level up process involves also unlocking cosmetic rewards for your character. So that's 3 combat allies, each with 30 levels, which really is a hell of a lot of progression. Then to round off Nazjatar, there is the main story quest line that will involve, kind of like with Argus, us trying to break our way into the raid. And we have been told that the raid will unlock around 3 weeks after the patch drops. So it's pretty safe to say that the core questline here will unlock over those 3 weeks, which also lines up roughly with what I'm expecting from the mount unlock time. So that should be a good rush of stuff near the beginning. Oh, and the combat allies also have their own daily quest as well. So how does this leave us with this zone? Well, first, the progression seems to be better designed. Right now in BFA, we complete world quests, we get some rep, we get our emissary rewards. That's basically it. The world quests themselves are then quite spread out around the zones and they're all pretty samey. Bar the Paragon box and the emissary reward, there's just no form of progression really. Well, with Nazjatar, those world quests themselves seem to be better designed with the affixes and the elite enemies and some other systems that they seem to be applying to them, maybe with better spawning. So that's pretty good. Hopefully they will add in some more systems around the elites as well, maybe some powerful consumables that drop from them or something like that, like the Centenax beacons just giving you an extra little layer to them. But anyway, if the world quest spawning patterns are a little bit more dense, then they would really just benefit from the elites and the changes that they bring to the zone. If they're able to do that, I think this will definitely be a more engaging version of world quests. And then Jeremy was also quite clear about how these are supposed to feel more tied into Ashara and the fight against her army. And I suppose that basically just means that design-wise, there'll be less silly stuff with them maybe being more tightly designed around that war theme. And that is something that the regular world quests kind of struggled with, but the incursion ones did manage to do a little bit better. Of course, there have to be a lot more than just what I've talked about here, because MMORPGs are about progression. And that seems to be where these are significantly better than the core BFA content, perhaps indicating that Blizzard understand that just AP and Paragon box rep does not feel satisfying. So we've got the 30 levels for each of our combat allies. We then have the various different base progression mechanics, which seem to be tied into the daily objectives. So overall, there does appear to be more progression feedback loops at play within this zone. While it is the more traditional of the two zones, it does appear to be trying to do more than most outdoor zones that we've had so far in BFA, certainly just a lot more than the core BFA World Quest experience, which personally I've not engaged in for months. Next up, Mechagon. So Mechagon really does seem like the designer's playground, with it being the most secret dense zone in World of Warcraft to date. This zone actually appears to be skipping out on everything since the Timeless Isle, essentially being a direct follow-up to the Timeless Isle, and that's something I'm very happy to hear. So Mechagon is a gnomish island with, well, basically it's a big outdoor scrap heap, and then the large city of Mechagon that's ruled by an evil king who wants to turn everyone into a machine. So the denizens of this friendly town called Rustbolt are trying to resist, and that is where we come in. So Rustbolt serves as our hub for Mechagon, but Rustbolt, when we find it, is in ruins, with there being loads of broken technology scattered throughout the outdoor zone. So the core progression of this zone is us upgrading Rustbolt by contributing various different resources to various different projects. I assume with those things conferring, benefits for you. This primarily seems to be done through resource mechanics, and with this zone being similar to the Timeless Isles, it probably will involve a decent amount of just grinding up those resources. I imagine we'll have a few time-efficient sources per day, with there just being repeatable stuff past that. Now, the zone is said to be littered with just things in general, and according to T&E, is not very handholdy. It's full of stuff, including quests, such as you just stumble upon stuff. I mean, you can use a guide, but you get the point here. It's more freeform in its design. Now, the primary currency seems to be scrap. This seems to have two uses. One is through Pascal, your upgrade and construction robot friend, and the other one is through maybe repairing and tinkering things in the field. What does that actually mean? Well, the zone is said to be full of machinery. This machinery can be activated using resources, meaning the Blizzard can pretty much put whatever effects into this zone that they want. One example is a boss level enemy spawning near two turrets. You'd be able to power up those turrets to help you fight that boss. So there's a bunch of stuff in the field that you can kind of manipulate. As for the other uses for the scrap resource, well, Jeremy said that we will help the Rust Bolt people repair their city. That includes building new mailboxes, he said, and also city defenses. It just seems like we're expanding the hub over time. Again, we don't know if this is personal, individual progression or if it's regional, though personal would make a lot more sense given how these resources seem to be working. Now, the primary upgrades seem to be done through Pascal, who is in Rust Bolt. Now, one example of a Rust Bolt upgrade that we saw on his UI was the encrypted radio receiver. Past this, there are loads of different rewards and consumables. Jeremy talked about a type of grenade, and then on the Pascal window, we saw the scrap grenade, the scrap trap, and the holographic digitalization hearthstone. Seemingly they're all consumables, and it was mentioned that, for an example, you would want to stock up on those grenades before you'd head over to Nazjatar. So it seems like those things are actually balanced to be powerful and work in other zones. Pascal also has gadgets like the ultra-safe Mechagon transporter, the disposable radio, and the Mechano treat. There's also then other items like the experimental adventure augment or battle box and Rust Bolt requisitions, which all seem to be resource mechanics for the zone. There's then the emergency power and repair packs under the construction tab. Now, in my head, it seems like these are going to be used to activate like combat allies and to repair those turrets out in the world, but we'll have to see. Then finally, there's the Mechano Cat laser pointer, which gets you a mech cat for which you can unlock paint jobs later on. Now, the people who were at the recent summit had the chance to play this content, with T&E reporting that this zone is not time-gated bar its dungeon, and that it very much is it's kind of a grind-focused zone that's full of different hand-ins. There's then also the 3 visitors per day. These visitors have their own quests, that are really good for rep, and they also modify the spawning of the zone. Past that, then there's loads of secrets. It's supposed to be the most secret dense zone in the game, and rares that are like the Timeless Isles. What does that actually mean? Well, the rares spawning in would actually be rare, they'd be important to everyone in the zone, and some of them are spawned in by completing actions. So chances are this means there will be more rewards from those rares, just like what we saw from the Timeless Isle rares. And this seems really fantastic to me. I love the idea of building up Rust Bolt. I think grinds are no bad thing in an MMO as long as they're well managed and their stuff just feels, I guess, opt-in, and so far this seems to be in that way. Power-wise, it seems like there's a lot to mess around with your character here with the new grenades and the machinery that can be activated out in the world, so that should be mechanically satisfying. It seems essentially like an evolution over the Timeless Isles. Now, if this was on par with the Timeless Isles, then because it was also coming alongside with Nazjatar, then I think we're on to a winner. But the thing is, this actually looks to be a little bit better than the Timeless Isles. Then past this, there's also the Champions of Azeroth content, but from what I understand, Blizzard were pretty tight-lipped about it, other than saying we'd be traveling around the world with Magni and co, doing stuff with essences. So where are we left overall with all of this information? I'd say that Nazjatar seems to be quite a bit better than Kulturas and Zandalar, and then Mechagon seems to be at least on par or maybe a bit better than Timeless Isles, at least in concept. So we're getting 2 new zones that seem to be solid improvements over what we're used to. Nazjatar likely will not blow people away, bar the usual set pieces and cool lore, but I do think it will have more lasting power than the World Quest areas of core BFA because of the new combat allies and the base progression mechanics. I think it seems like Blizzard are trying to better understand what types of progression their players find to be satisfying, and they've basically made 2 different outdoor zones that target that in different ways. Now, sure, AP farming might be something that hardcores feel obligated to do, but it's definitely something that doesn't really work for the people who don't care about that. And it seems like these zones are trying to give those people something more interesting to care about, such as leveling up your combat allies through the world quests. Then gameplay-wise, those combat allies could be quite good, depending on how their abilities are designed. And again, while the world quests are not a dramatic improvement, probably they at least seem like a bit of an incremental one that exists with better design progression overall. So slightly better gameplay maybe, significantly better progression is what I would say. As for Mechagon, well, this could be the real winner here. The Timeless Isles had a hell of a lot of longevity, and if they could even just replicate that, then it would be a great complement to Nazjatar. I think rounding out its more, I'd imagine Nazjatar is like a 30 to 60 minute a day traditional gameplay experience, so having an open-ended thing to complement that is really good. On paper, I think this is a significant improvement over what we currently have. Nazjatar is probably not as far as I would like to see them go with the innovation of their world content, as many of you probably know. But within the scope of an expansion patch, I think it is a good move. And I think that Mechagon, even if it was just a straight Timeless Isles copy, I think that would be a good thing. What's more interesting to me is that these are two zones with very different designs. I'm fairly sure that Blizzard are going to be paying a lot of attention to how players engage with the two zones, because after all, with this being patch 8.2, we can be pretty sure that 9.0 development is kicking off at Blizzard, and they're going to be thinking about that stuff. So I expect this to provide a really good month of gameplay for the casual WoW players, with another 2 to 4 of stuff to do for the people who would have farmed a lot of Timeless Isles back in the day in MoP. I think that in concept, this is a improvement over what we currently have, and it could be a game changer within the bounds of the Battle for Azeroth expansion. Past that, we'll just have to see how these two outdoor zones influence the content design of patch 8.3 and of 9.0, as that'll really tell us what Blizzard have learned from the experiments that they seem to be doing with patch 8.2. So there you go, that is my thoughts on world content. It's obviously a topic that I care a lot about in terms of design. I think it's one of the areas where WoW has been lacking, so it's nice to see that efforts are being made here. Again though, we just need to check it out in the PTR, see what it's all like, but it's sounding good, I can say that much. Of course, there's a lot more content on the channel. We've got our whole team working a lot over yesterday, today, and the next few days, so it'll be a pretty exciting time. So check out the channel. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.